James at 16 will not be presented this evening, but will return next week at its regular time. Stay tuned now for a special 2-hour What Really Happened to the Class of 65.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
That's, me kind of doing a very light take on the version of Batman I was raised by, which is sort of post Neil Adams take, which he was doing the year I was born. Neil Adams was redefining the character kind of in the cracks and corners of DC when he was first a cover artist on a lot of the Batman books in the late 60s, and then once they gave him sort of the run of the place, his look, he kind of exaggerated even more with the lighting and the grandeur, the way he would exaggerate the figure form, the length of the ears, the length of the cape. A lot of it was just sort of aesthetics. He wasn't really changing the costume per se. I tried to illustrate what Adams did with a sense of maybe somewhat photo exacting kind of take on it, while also kind of avoiding some of the comic book tropes of the glowing white eyes, which I was always having a problem with as a kid, thinking about like how the mask is pretty much on his face like it's makeup. Like it's as close to the skin as you can get the way it was drawn by everybody, Adams included. And if that's the case, there's no room to hide the eyelashes for the human being wearing this mask, so basically just his natural eyes showing, but you can hide that in shadow.
Welcome back, everybody. Happy Halloween. Welcome to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suttress here. I'm really happy to do my Halloween show with my good friend, the former Vertigo editor, the former IDW Black Crown editor, and making her own comics her way. It's Shelly Bond. Welcome back, bud.
Thank you so much. I wanted to introduce one of my friends to you, John. This is my friend, the Raven.
Nevermore. Yes.
And one of my jobs as an assistant editor on Sandman was to make sure that Matthew the Raven did not have a yellow beak, because that would mean he was a crow, and Matthew was a raven.
Wow. It sounds like Mr. Burns' nuclear plant on The Simpsons. I was like that when they have the wide shot, they always just have the random buzzard crowing and everything. So
it might be. I hope you don't mind that Philip decided to hang out in the back tonight. My husband, Philip Bond, he's busy drawing. He doesn't want to say anything. So I told him just to keep a dumb expression on his face. And he was like, yeah, sure, that's okay. I'm an artist. I'm just going to keep working while you blab, as usual, about comics.
Hi, Phil.
He says hi.
I'm glad he joined us. Shell, let me see your mug. Hold on. You gotta have it up front where we can see the words.
I came dressed for the occasion. I'm drinking for the occasion. It's Diet Coke.
Oh, very nice. I prefer Coke Zero, and I never really liked Diet Coke, but having drunk so much Coke Zero, when they're out of Coke Zero, I will have Diet Coke, and now I can handle it better. It tastes better to me.
Interesting. Now, Philip is a Coke Zero kind of guy. Not that he's going to comment right now, but trust me on that one. So excited to be back with you, especially on Halloween. So before we dive into comics, you must tell me, what was your most memorable Halloween costume?
Most memorable. Well, when I was a kid, I would do Groucho Marx a lot. Mom would give me the eyebrow pencil and doing the eyebrows and the mustache and give me, reading glasses and stuff and a fake cigar, plastic cigar. But I'm very proud when I became an adult, and especially Art Baltazar and Franco's comic shop, Oh Yeah Comics, in suburban Chicago. we would have great parties, and they still do. But I used to go when it was a brand new store, and I
Wait a
got
minute. Wait a minute. Are you trying to say you're not invited to the parties anymore?
No, I am.
What did you do?
I
Oh, okay. All right. Let's go back to you.
I'm like, all right, let me dress. And I was very proud of myself because what I did was I had black khakis, a black sweatshirt. I went to Spirit Hollywood, could not find what I wanted, and this is why Amazon is winning. Went to Amazon, found a plastic derby and a little mask, and I bought white stencil that you might put on a colored mailbox in your home, and I wrote goon, and I was a Penguin Batman 66 henchman.
Perfect. Wow.
Yeah, and it was the cheapest costume because all I had to pay for, I had the sweatshirt, I had the black pants, but all I had to pay for was the derby and the plastic mask, and I'm like, I'm ready. And it was great because comic people are like, we know who you are. I'm like, yeah, you're damn right you do.
Exactly. And that's where the trouble began. That's when things started disappearing from the party.
It's true. No, I was the hero because unbelievable. Well, it's not because it's Chicago. We actually had snow. It didn't accumulate, but we absolutely had real snow today during Halloween. But I remember
I'm jealous. I'm jealous. It was 80 here.
Well, that's good. You see, now we happen to have a warm day one Halloween, and the store didn't have air conditioning. And if I may, the hero went to Walgreens and bought a couple fans. And it's
nice.
Like, man, I'm like, so yeah, no, actually, I was helpful for the parties and stuff.
There you go.
Yeah. So
once again, the hero of comics.
What was your memorable costumes? You've got to have been flamboyant. Come on.
Oh, I've had tons. One I've been posting on my social media feeds lately has been a very classic black cat. And the reason I loved it so much is I loved cat ears, but I also loved wearing tap shoes with the outfit. But it was my sister who actually was the real sport that year. My mom was an elementary school teacher. So she made us our costumes back in those days. This had to be like 1972. My sister was really the worst crepe paper Big Bird I've ever seen. And I do call it Big Bird from Hell because I don't even know how she was talked into wearing that outfit. But for anyone that is curious, not only that year were those costumes used for Halloween, but we recycled them and we used them in our summer camp game show. And we both won prizes that year. So I actually am going to hold up a page because this is proof. This is proof that other side, my sister, who is there, very upset because she didn't get picked, but there's me in the cat suit. So yeah, that was a memorable one. The most recent favorite costumes, again, wish I brought photos. I've been putting them on social media. Philip and I went to a Halloween party a few years ago, and the theme was Star. And independently, we both said, hey, let's be Edie Sedgwick and Andy Warhol. And Philip is the best Andy Warhol I've ever seen. Full stop. So those were our favorite costumes of all.
That's cool. And, I totally forgot. And no one will be surprised, especially when they see me and my face. Back in college, I got some orange felt and black felt and sky blue felt, and I made my own Fred Flintstone costume.
Oh, that's so perfect for you. I can see that. Wow. Did you bring a picture with you? Did you bring, but in a good way? Did you bring?
Thanks, buddy. No, I know. I appreciate it. It's okay.
Did you bring the picture?
Oh, no, I don't have the picture. Right. But and then, so that was in college. And then in modern day, I went to Joann Fabrics and bought and did it again and everything. And I bought, I cut out the dots for the leopard kind of look and everything that Fred has. And I just, for the sky blue, I just had a long rectangle thing. Basically, it looked like a scarf. So it really didn't look like a tie. But I'm like, yeah, close enough, whatever.
Hey,
come on.
It sounds fantastic. And listen, I'm not doing this on purpose, but you mentioned Fred Flintstone, and I gotta say that Pebbles Flintstone is near and dear to my heart because the impetus for even putting together this book, not final cover, this is a dummy book. This is a dummy book, which means it's everything that I need to have with me when I am approving the final comic digitally before it goes to press. But my nickname in summer camp, back in the day camp years, 71 to 74, was Pebbles. I was a huge fan of the character from the cartoon, and I had the lunchbox. And on the lunchbox, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a teenage Pebbles and Bam Bam, and they were in a band. And I was
Yes, of course they were.
determined to grow up and to be Pebbles Flintstone, be in a band, and wear my hair with like a bone in it. So my mom tried her best, and she always put my hair up so that it sort of kind of looked like I had my hair up in a ponytail, like Pebbles.
Yeah.
And my cousin, who was also a camper with me, used to always get mad at me because she would say, "We can't call you Pebbles because you don't have red hair." And I kept trying to explain to her that didn't really matter. I could dye my hair red.
All right.
Stone.
Do you remember? I only remember one of Pebbles' other girlfriends on the teen Pebbles and Bam Bam show. First of all, Jane North, teen Bam Bam, former Dennis the Menace star of the 50s and 60s.
That is right.
And was Sally Struthers on that show? Because I know she was on. Or no, I think it was Sally Struthers played Teen Pebbles. I'm gonna look it up while we're talking. But
yeah, please do. I don't remember, and I did not prepare for the.
Okay, because I know one of them was named Wiggy. One of the girls,
I remember.
Friends.
I do remember the friend Wiggy. I don't remember too much about the actual cartoon of the teenagers, and I did not do my homework for the show. I'm mess up, move on.
Well, real fast, it was also the last time Alan Reed played Fred because he passed away afterwards. And then got a Henry, and I can't think of Henry's last name, but the guy that took over as Fred, you might remember from a Brady Bunch episode where he owned the ice cream parlor that Jan and Marsha worked at. And comic books, Michael Gray, television's own Billy Batson, was Marsha's boyfriend in that episode. So yeah.
Whoa. Okay, that was a good one.
Rob says, yeah, Penny was the other girl, Penny and Wiggy.
Oh, nice. I love it.
Wiggy was like almost like new age in the 70s. Oh, my stars. I remember she used to say that. She had big yellow hair.
Excellent. That's so great.
And
all right.
And Rob says, and of course, Moonrock.
Yes, I remember Moonrock. Now, I can't remember if the Way Ups.
The Way Outs.
Remember that song? We're going way up, way up. That's where the fun is. Was that also a part of Teenage Pebbles and Flintstone, or was that just part of the regular Flintstone series?
That was regular because that comes up a lot when Art Franco and I do our podcast. That the Way Outs come up. The guy who sang the Twitch instead of the Twist, and Fred Flintstone. Fred had a recording career, and he was hi-fi, and he was doing kind of a high-end jazz. Listen to the Mockingbird, and he had a Southern manager like Colonel Parker, and he's like, I never saw a phenomenon like this since this boy from Georgia, and that was like his like fake Elvis kind of reference, even though Elvis wasn't from Georgia. But oh man, I love the Flintstones. Good Lord.
I would have never guessed that you knew so much about TV trivia like the Flintstones. Duh. Also, if you don't like a response of duh, you probably won't like reading this. Because there's kid speak, you know?
Yes.
It's how we talk.
Seriously. It's a lot of fun. It's our childhood. I mean, you and I are close enough to the same age that I certainly get the references. And yeah, it's not, I mean, I don't think my parents were confident that I could handle overnight camp, but I did do day camp. And, there's still a lot of the same tropes in the book and things. Suddenly one summer camp from hell. And I'm sorry, Liz's last name?
Liz Prince.
Who does the art.
Liz is the reason that I look so good in this book because Liz is such a phenomenal cartoonist. I've never written all ages. I mean, let's face it, I haven't written a lot of things in my career, but you know, when you're out there on your own self-publishing, you got to try everything, right? So this was my attempt to not only bring so many of my favorite summer camp adventures onto the page, but I really wanted to work with a seasoned cartoonist like Liz because she is so hilarious. And I knew that she would make me look and sound better. And believe me when I tell you, she is making this book fantastic. So I'm going to hold, oh, you have a couple of images. That
Yeah,
stuff is
to
like
start.
obviously not final, but this is behind the scenes stuff that tells you a little bit about the characters. But I'm having such a good time with Liz. For people who don't know her work, please seek it out. She won the Ignatz Award for Tomboy, which is a phenomenal coming of age story. And she's had a recent book out as recently as last week. It's called Science Comics Frogs. And the great thing about Liz is that I've been working with her for a few years, but we've been working really closely for the past like 3 months. And I've always known that Liz loves nature and frogs and bugs. And, you know, she wrote a book called Tomboy. So you can imagine she wasn't like a super girly girl. I was the kid at camp who was like not only grossed out by nature, I was allergic to it and it was allergic to me. So my summer camp experiences were similar to Liz's, even though we're 17 years apart. But she was all in when it came to like the hikes and the crafts, the nature crafts. And I was, get me out of here because I'm sick and I can't stop sneezing and scratching. So it was kind of a great idea to bring us together to make this book because there's magic there on the page.
I understand. There are great references. I really don't think camps change. I have friends who their family own a summer camp, and there's always stories. And you have a great vignette about bug juice, and certainly in my summer camp there was bug juice and everything. And
Now, let me ask you a question about the bug juice. Did you know what was in it?
yeah,
Or did
yeah.
you just assume there were lots of different types of bugs in it?
No,
I
I
mean,
knew
I'm
I
being
knew it's a
serious.
nickname. Yeah, I understand. I will defer to people to buy the book and read the story about bug juice. But that's great,
I'm,
Shell. Honestly, like that, these are little vignettes, and it's over the years because you went from. My God, you were there pretty young. Your
I
parents
was.
overnight
They,
camp, like really young.
well, they booted me out of the house because I was willing. You know, the other thing that's interesting about my early years is that, you know, I have a sister who lots of people don't hear about because she's 18 months older, but she always seemed like 80 years older than me. She was not into anything I was into, and she was afraid of the grass. So she had different fears and phobias, and I just didn't want to be anything like her, and vice versa. So, what's been great about putting this book together is that not only do we follow the day camp years in the first issue, which is 1971 to 1974, but she plays a part in those years because, of course, she went to camp and she was a bookworm. So she also didn't want to be there to play sports. We were both terrible at sports. She wasn't even into arts and crafts. She did not get into the Peanuts gang. This was my sister through the whole
Stand
time at camp. She would
put
just
it back
bring,
up.
she would just be reading. She'd have her nose in a book.
Oh, I see.
And
I see. I
and
thought you were
and
showing like
so
fiction.
no, this is the genius of Liz Prince. So I tried to make sure that the script was, I didn't over art direct in the script because Liz's art is phenomenal. And so Liz added everything that I would write down, and I try to really describe a decent picture. But then she added things that just made the story better. And that to me is the best collaborator. So every time my sister appears in this comic, she's got a book in her hand. You know, whether she's like, you know, sitting behind the camp director's desk right here, or if she's on the bus going home from camp, Liz put a book in her hand. So that to me is an artist on fire, and hopefully an artist who's enjoying working with a writer who's still kind of new at this. But I'd like to think that we really had a blast because we shared a similar experience, and we both feel like the all ages demographic is interesting. There are people that do it really well, and then there are people that just pander and have a cautionary tale, and they're telling the same old stories you've heard before. So I think we both shared a common goal. We wanted to make sure that this book appealed to not only kids that are young enough to maybe go away to camp and to enjoy themselves, but to their parents and grandparents, so that those people, like you and me, ancient fossils in comics, we can get people younger than us and we can get our friends' kids into the periodical, which is the comic book, which is what we love. We are purists. So even though I'm holding this up as a dummy book, this is the working dummy, and it will be a 6x9 periodical in black and white with a color cover.
That's great.
So,
and I want to mention right away that you have started a Kickstarter campaign, and it's a short window, everybody. It's only about a little over 2 weeks. It ends November 15th, right, Shel?
Yeah, it's 15 days. And I did a short one to be really honest, because I want to get the book to everyone by the end of the year. Most of the Kickstarters that I do are for original graphic novels, and they take a long time. But you're investing essentially in me in a big body of work. So since I was doing something so different with an all ages book, I really wanted to make sure I got it into people's hands as quickly as possible. And no lie, Liz Prince is one of the fastest artists I've worked with, and she doesn't skimp on quality. So please know that we've been working on this for the past few months, and we're finished. Even though this has some notes in it and it's not a final, this is 98% finished. We are wrapping up a few tweaks and changes. We have a craft page, which is going to be a feature in every comic. So it's a how-to. And we have a story about these little pom-pom pets, as we call them. They were little balls of yarn that we used to make at camp. And so Liz and I thought it'd be great to have a tutorial, because our goal, again, is to connect with people of all ages, to share, the highs and lows of summer camp, because I think most of us have good experiences and bad.
Sure.
So, John, the other thing I want to make sure is clear to people listening, if they're interested, is that issue number 1, it's day camp. It's tiny hells. Okay. So it's like, I realize I have eczema. Now, eczema is a lifelong problem for me. And it's, for people who don't know, it's like having zits, but they're really dry. So you bleed and scratch and flake. And there were times in my life I was covered from my chin to my toes. So discovery, but I can still deal with it because my parents did not let me sit out, or they didn't baby me, I should say. Came from a school of, if I had trouble and I was crying, my dad would say to me, I have 2 words for you: boo hoo. Get back in the game. Go back to camp. You're not sick. Go to camp. You'll feel better by noon, and then you'll have bug juice and you'll come home. And he was right.
That's great.
So
no, you need that.
The first issue, totally. First issue, Tiny Hells of Day Camp. Second issue, I was young when I went to my first run of overnight camp. It was 4 weeks, and that was the period between 1975 and 1979, which I know are pivotal years for you musically, I'm sure for TV as well. But those were interesting years. I was 8, and I know I told you the story where I was the littlest camper, the youngest camp, always the shortest in the room. So yeah, that was a problem for me, but I made sure that they noticed me anyway. And there were things that happened to me, we build up on the hills. So these medium hells in the second book are things like, when it was a rainy day at camp, the counselors thought it would be okay to take a group of 8-year-olds to see Tommy by the Who movie by Ken Russell.
Russell, very disturbing movie.
Right?
Go on.
So
very
Tina
Turner plays the Acid Queen. And
exactly.
And also, for people who don't know the rock opera that the Who made, Tommy is traumatically turned blind and deaf. So for a good portion of the movie, Roger Daltrey is just, like completely like
with black glasses on and
yes.
out of it.
I mean, it's a great music movie. Clapton is in it. Elton John is in it. Tina Turner, as I said, obviously the Who. And it's a very interesting movie, but incredibly disturbing for a little kid to watch. Go on. What was your reaction?
Absolutely. Well, I'll just tell you, I'm still not fond of baked beans. And go
And
figure, I
Margaret.
married a British man who loves beans on toast. So it's an all ages book. So I just want to make sure everybody knows there will not be horrific images, but I will definitely enjoy satirizing these disturbances because, sometimes things happen. And counselors, when you're a kid and you are under the care of a counselor, you think that counselor is like 50 years old. Those counselors are not much older than you, so mistakes were made. But the greatest thing that happened to me in summer camp was I discovered David Bowie because of those same counselors. So they get a free pass.
I respect that. Mentioning camps, there is a documentary about a water park in New Jersey, and it's on Max, and it's called Class Action Park. And it was called Action Park. It was in New Jersey. And years ago, I had an 8mm film of my family before I was born. They took a family trip to one of the Playboy clubs.
Whoa.
And the filmmaker asked me, can I use this footage in my documentary? I can't pay you. And I said, as long as you give me a screen credit, I'm okay with that. I understand, independent filmmakers, and I support them. So I am listed in the credits. But the reason why I bring it up is mentioning that the counselors weren't that much older than the kids. These were the most, and it's an amazing movie. It's all these people that were teenage counselors or workers at this amusement park, water park, and they created rides that OSHA absolutely would not have approved. They had, if you ever work in a warehouse, there are rollers on platforms that they move the boxes on. They almost look like roller skate wheels and stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the rides was they had like kind of a ski slope of these wheels, and they would put people on a wooden sled. They'd run down and they would fly out and then land in the middle of this incredibly icy cold body of water in Jersey. But the best is they had those water slide tubes, and they were giant size, obviously big enough for people. They would pay the kids $100 to test the ride.
Wow.
Yeah, which obviously and this was in the 80s, so a lot of money. So kids, the first group of kids went
How many
through,
comics could you buy with $100 in like the 80s, right?
yeah, because comics were, I think, probably under $1 still back in the 80s, probably were 60 cents or something like that. So so these kids, after the first group went in, the second wave also tried the ride, and all of a sudden there were cuts on their arms and legs. And the reason why was teeth from the first group of kids were embedded in the tubes.
Wow.
So the next group of kids were all scratched up. So this is like the most insane movie that that's like another summertime thing. I know it's technically not summer camp. Although one of my day camps, we did go to a couple amusement parks that were water parks and things as activities and things. What was the name of your camp? Your camps, I should say.
Well, I have to ask you first, what was your credit on this movie? Were you like Fred Flintstone honoree? Like, what was your credit? I'm curious.
Additional,
just like
additional footage. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I
Yeah,
just wanted to check because
it's my,
I'm trying to figure out. Okay.
Yeah, it's my second IMDb credit. Go ahead.
So I'm actually changing the names of the camps. And of all of the kids, except my sister, who gave me permission, who, by the way, laughed harder at the first issue than anything I've heard her laugh at. And she's never read any of the comics I've been associated with. And that has always offended me, not really, because she doesn't read comics, but she loves it. She thinks it's really funny. And she actually becomes like the star of the first issue. And I wasn't planning on it. I'm not sure if I'm even still happy about it, but there you go. I do adore her. we are still nothing alike. And I'm sure, like other people listening, anyone who has siblings or, close cousins, it's like sometimes you're so different. You feel like you're from different families. Like one of you must be adopted, and it's not me. That's how it was growing up, and it's still like that.
My
In
sister's.
fact,
I'm sorry. Please finish.
no,
Please.
same with you. One of the things I wanted to also mention, and I love your story about and I'm going to look for that documentary, but I think one of the greatest things about summer camp, and it's why it goes in and out of fashion, why it's always like, they say it's a tough genre, but it's people that love it, adore it, and then some people don't get it. But if you think about it, it's the ultimate place for reinvention and transformation. So I was actually talking to a friend the other day, Steve Siegel, who's a friend of yours, a great writer of Sandman Mystery Theater and House of Secrets. And he has a camp book out called Camp Midnight that came out many years ago. But we were talking about how it's not unlike going to college or maybe even a career arc. And I've written so much about my career in comics that pivoting, as I finished the third part of my editing trilogy, which is taking longer than I had hoped, this book felt like a really good thing to focus on, because if you liked my career arc, you can really go back to where it started, which is way back in the beginning, because I really do believe that how you're raised and how much freedom your parents give you and how much they let you spread your wings really does teach you a lot of things about life. So anything about the bullying that really happens sort of at the end of the second issue a little bit, but really kicks up in part of the third issue in 1980. That was my year from hell. You suck it up, you learn from it, and it sucks. But what it teaches you is that hell is other people. Kids are mean, adults are mean. The world we're living in, nasty times. And I hope that people that are tuning in tonight are getting a break from what's on the news constantly, because that's why we're here. We know there are horrible things happening out there. And
Yes.
what I hope we can continue to do with comics is to entertain, because really that's what we do best. It's the ultimate art form. It's what we put in between the panel borders. I'm hoping when people read this, it's not really about my summer camp adventures as much as it is about them remembering theirs, and hopefully reminding people that the periodical is boss. There's something so beautiful about having something like this. And again, the cover is going to be finished in color, and it's going to have a different back cover, but you can get lost in this like you can't get lost in so many other things. It's there's
Yeah.
something so special about it. In black and white, if I may. Black and white still makes me feel like nothing else. I get goosebumps. And Liz's
I'm so with
artwork,
you. Yes.
so solid.
No, I love black and white comics. I completely agree with you. And also just it has that great indie vibe. I mean, you and I, when we were in the 80s, when the black and white boom of independent comics was really happening, it was great because it felt like counterculture stuff, from stuff like Liz's Bigfoot cartoony, almost Nancy style. It reminds me a lot of
Sure.
Nancy and Sluggo. And but to
Well,
even
actually,
I was going to
yeah,
say
actually, well,
even Terry Beatty doing and Max Collins doing Ms. Tree. No,
oh,
black and white is
totally.
effective. So yeah,
Well,
go
I
ahead.
have to say, Liz and I have a love for 1950s Charles Schultz and the Peanuts gang. And I think that over the years, when people ask me if I read comics as a kid, I would truthfully say no. I was a song and dance kid. I like to twirl the baton. But I love the Peanuts, and I read the books, and I loved the TV shows. And when my mom was teaching, she would have to make centers for her kids. So she would actually use a big projector, and I would help her trace characters. And the Peanuts, especially Peppermint Patty, she was my favorite. We were always creating something with her or for her. I should say I was, not my sister. My sister was reading in her room, and she was reading Nancy Drew, probably 5 years before she should. And she
That's
was
great.
always reading like 3 levels above her age range. And she was very happy doing that. She did not need to be a part of the in crowd. She did not need a record collection, which, by the way, that's still That is still weird.
Shell,
And
like seriously, do we have the same sister? Because
we might.
5 years older, we're nothing alike. She really never really had I remember one of the few albums she had was The Best of Bread.
Oh no. Oh my God. All right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just comforting to hear this because, like, I do know people who have really tight relationships with their siblings.
Oh,
And I'm
sure.
like, if it works, that's great.
Well,
Didn't
like we had each
happen,
other's we
hasn't
had each
happened.
other's we had each other's backs, but we just were into different things. So no, I absolutely get it. That's and also much like you with comics, all the radio and TV stuff, the rest of the family, my big fat Greek family, was always like, "Oh my God, John, you were on TV, you were on the radio, or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh, I did a show called Prophets of Science Fiction for the Discovery Channel." Oh yeah, I remember you telling me about that. Yeah, did you ever watch it? No, no, I had no. No. And I'm
Yep.
like, all right. Now she's
Well,
cool. Now she cheers me on. She's very impressed with the podcast of all
oh, I'm
things.
sure.
But
Well,
yeah,
you are gonna have to have this particular double page spread printed out and framed for your sister because yeah, this is pretty much the one that shows everything about how different we were. Um, to go into a little TV trivia, so the Partridge Family was big in the early '70s. I'm sure you were a fan.
we
Well, my
watched it.
sister,
Brady
yeah,
Bunch
right,
and Partridge Family watched
yep,
it together.
back to
Excuse me.
back.
Go ahead. Yes.
My sister just loved David Cassidy. Now, I'm not going to lie, I thought he was cute, but I was
Sure.
not going to like him because she liked him. So I prefer David Bowie. But, he
Yeah, but
didn't,
before that, come on. You told me in
Donny
emails and
Osmond.
text. Donny Osmond.
I was
Yep.
more of a Donny Osmond, but only because she got to David Cassidy first.
Okay.
So,
No, my
the,
sister had 16 and Tiger Beat posters from the magazine all over her door of her room, and really loved David, loved Bobby Sherman was big in our house as
yep.
well, and David Cassidy and the Osmonds, absolutely.
And I think when the mid to late '70s came around, it was Leif Garrett and Robbie Benson. Those were
Yeah,
the big heartthrobs.
Yeah, she was older, so she didn't get into them, but yeah.
Well,
One-on-one Robbie Benson, the great college basketball movie, Robbie Benson.
Oh, I was thinking about Ice Castles, but then again,
well, that's fair too.
I'm being
But
kind of
also,
girly.
Robbie Benson, a lot of animation voice work. I didn't know
wow.
that, but he does. Now in his however old he is and everything, he does a lot of voiceover stuff, which is hilarious.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. One thing I wanted to mention. So, I talked about issue 1 being day camp, issue 2 being sort of the overnight camp for 4 weeks. Issue 3 is overnight camp, and the worst of all, 8 weeks, hated the camp. After that, that's when things really turned around because I was a camp counselor back at Camp Toady. And if you think that Camp Toady was the real name of that camp, it was not. Okay. I know you're disappointed, John, but
I am.
That's a made-up name.
I was hoping for names, but all right.
But legit, the day camp I went to, I was a camp counselor from 1981 to 1983.
Wow.
Those were the best years because those were the years that I started to realize that whether you're bullied or whether you're liked at camp, when you become a counselor, you kind of really you realize that you have to take all those lessons you learned as a camper and apply them now to the other kids. And I really feel like I matured a lot in those years. And luckily for me, it's not only because the kids liked me and thought I was cool. I called myself kind of a new wave camp counselor because I introduced them to cool music like my counselors introduced to me. So it's paying it forward.
Who'd you introduce them to?
Well, I'm not going to reveal that because I haven't talked about my early 80s crush in music because people won't believe me. And I'm going to keep it a secret so that somebody buys this book. But John,
I thought it might be Joe Strummer, but go on.
It's not. I mean, I love Joe Strummer. 1982, I mentioned, the Clash played JFK in Philadelphia on my birthday. I was sweet 16. I'm like, Dad. He's like, don't even think about it. I'm like, I'm 16. I actually can drive. In Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, you could drive if you had a learner's permit at 15. I'm like, Dad, I got this. He's like, you are not going to a concert in Philadelphia. I mean, I was furious. I think that's the only time I really went harumph, and I was like, oh, I'm going to regret this forever, but I'm going to yell at my dad. But it wasn't Joe Strummer.
Okay.
I will tell you that the greatest thing for me was when the music and drama teacher at the camp was caught smoking around the kids and fired on the spot.
Wow.
And I was asked, guess what? If I would now become the music and drama teacher and choreograph the camp show. And I was like 16 and a half, right? I'm like, yeah. So that was a great stepping stone. And I met someone who actually recommended Ithaca College to me as a great college for the performing arts and for communications and film. And that's why I chose Ithaca College. So it's full circle. At Ithaca College, I discovered comic books. So without summer camp and my great arc, I might not be here talking to you. I might be sitting in my room reading a Nancy Drew book without a record collection, which would be a very sad thing, John. So cheers to you and to comics and summer camp.
Indeed. I appreciate it. Ed Cato, very happy that you mentioned, of course, that you're an alumnus of Ithaca. He's there and he puts on Ithacon every year with his kids, which I think is really clever. Rob Perry, who's watching us, is a former alum as well.
Yes, Rob is just experiencing heavy rotation. I met up with Rob again at the CXC convention in Columbus last month. We hadn't seen each other since his freshman year and my senior year at Ithaca, which was 1980. I'm not going to answer that. And I could have gone 1980. I think I'll do that from now on.
Fair enough.
Rob reminded me that he was the DJ that followed me. Excuse me a second. Don't do that again. He was one year the DJ that followed my shift, so he would come in early to pick out his music while I was wrapping up. And he read comics, and we had a great time catching up. And I handed him Heavy Rotation, and he loved it, by the way. So I know he is going to listen to your podcast. We did a great show a couple years ago with Barbara Baker and some other friends from the station. So Rob, shout out to you for coming tonight. And yes, you will learn of my entire arc now.
Heavy Rotation. Heavy Rotation is Shell's college radio experiences. And again, this is part of our kinship that I, too, was a big part of my college radio station at Illinois State. And again, I always say, oh, Shell, if we were at the same school, we would have been friends. We absolutely would.
Absolutely. We might have had a tussle, though, if it was between you and me and Brian Ferry. And I don't think Rob Perry knows the Brian Ferry story. It's such a good one. I'm going to beg you, share this one for Rob because he needs to hear it. And anyone else who's listening, I know I've heard the story at least 5 times, and I want to hear it another time right now because it gets better every time.
Well,
and it might have ruined our relationship if it was between you and me and Brian Ferry. But go on.
In the 90s, I worked for 10 years at WXRT, which was a progressive rock station, alternative rock, and great place. And also at the same time, I worked at the All Sports station. They were both in the same building. I did work for both. So a Saturday night, I'm producing one of the sports talk shows, and our back doors for both the rock side and the sports side, they were kind of like an L. I mean, they were on completely opposite ends of the building, except for the exits in the back parking lot. So there's a knock and if you don't know which door, you might inadvertently, knock on the sports side when you really want the rock side. So I'm producing a show, knock on the doors, mid 6 o'clock Saturday night. And I go to the door and I open it. And there in his full, I'm going to be on stage in 2 hours, but I'm here now, in his solo regalia, feathered hair, debonair Brian Ferry of Roxy Music is at the door. and he is waiting for my good friend Terry Hemmert to do a radio interview. And he's like, "Hello, is Terry here?" And
And you're like, swooned.
And Terry is a very tall woman and not a small woman in any way, and literally is galloping down the hallway. Like, I got this, John. I got this, John. And I'm like, no problem. But I shook his hand. I said, "Very nice to meet you." You know, I knew exactly who it was because I'm a big alternative new wave rock guy. I loved Roxy music back in the day. Yeah. So, but as I've told Shell a million times, to even fill it out more, everybody, really fast, it was like living in a Monkees episode or Love Boat, because literally every month, every Tina Turner, John Fogerty, Lyle Lovett, Elvis Costello, all the Billy Corrigan from the Pumpkins, everybody would just come to the station to do an interview and perform live. Robbie Robertson came in, who we lost this year, and tragically, his solo album was out with Somewhere Down the Crazy River and everything. And they were playing the song while he was in studio talking to the DJ, and he said, "Hey, can I have the liner notes from the CD Jewel box?" And the DJ's like, "Yeah, here you go." And he goes, "You got a pen?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I can't remember which song it was, but in the credits they got like one of the guitarists wrong, and Robbie writes, "Incorrect. Actually, Jimmy, Such was the actual guitarist. I should know. I was there, Robbie Robertson." And he just kind of that passage for us.
Where was the proofreader? Right? Am I right? Where was the editor?
I don't know, but it is funny that like even on those kind of big things, those kind of mistakes happen. But yeah, no, again, just those kind of encounters. I mean, Ray Davies of the Kinks is, like we did a comedy bit together, and he's like, "Hey, that was fun," and I'm just like, "Uh-huh." Nice to meet you. John Hyatt is tuning his guitar. He's like, "Does this sound good?" I'm like, "How the hell do I know, man? I don't know." But yeah, it was so much fun. My God. Oh, Tad wants to know, and I know the answer to this. He wants to know if you saw Roxy recently.
I saw Roxy Music last year, and I think Tad knows this, and he's just being funny. I went to see the Roxy Music tour with China Flores, and we had the absolute best time. But I will tell you that the best time I saw Roxy Music Live was in 2019 at the Greek out here in LA. The best performance ever. I mean, they were very good last year, but I went by myself in 2019. I did not give Brian Ferry your regards, John. I'm sorry. I was thinking about it, but I didn't want to be spending time dwelling on you and not thinking about me. But
Indeed,
I didn't get to talk to him. But it was amazing. Amazing show.
So before you got into Bowie, were you a bubblegum pop kid? I mean, what music were you listening to as a little kid?
Yeah, I don't think I was ever a bubblegum pop kid, but the thing that I try to explain to my husband, who grew up with British radio and John Peel and really cool things, the one thing that, especially in the summer, we had heavy rotation, we had AOR, album-oriented rock, and you would hear sometimes the same song twice or three times an hour. So many of the songs that are still stuck in my head were not songs that I wanted to linger there. And that kind of leads me to what I'm not going to reveal, even if Tad or Rob beg, I am not going to reveal who my secret crush was in the early 80s until I actually put it down in the third issue of the book, because I'm not embarrassed by it now, but I would have been embarrassed by it 30 years ago. I'm going to leave it there. But radio, what was on the radio was what you listened to in your car when you were a camp counselor and you drove to work.
Sure.
And what was on the radio was what you would listen to at night when your parents would yell at you to turn off the stereo. But you could keep a radio right underneath your pillow. And
little transistor,
of course, the transistor. So something else that Liz and I are both fascinated with is the evolution of music from the 70s through the 80s. And I think for me, one of the greatest days of my life, I'm gonna split it into two. One of the greatest days was August 1st, 1981, when MTV came on the air, because that was just everything. All those British bands I would have never discovered. but also when I got my first Sony Walkman, because the idea that you can take it with you, like suddenly it was like, I can't believe I can actually make my own playlist and take it wherever I want to go and tune out the world. So that was like when the soundtrack of my life began. And, you know, you can say it's weird or lame, but to this day, something I can stick in my pocket or pocketbook or
Indeed.
back. I still think the power of comics is that you can just like grab a comic and jump on a bus. Yes, you can do that with your phone. Yes, you can do that with regular books. But there's something so immersive about a comic book. This is where I get on my pulpit. It's the ultimate art form because not only is it words and pictures, you've got to choose what to say, what to show, but also it's participatory and smart readers want to linger between the panel borders. And that's why I'm still here in comics. So the industry itself can continue to burn in a dumpster fire. Don't care. The kind of comics I want to make are the comics that connect people and that people appreciate as educational tools, amazing artistry, and push boundaries and remind us that we're human.
I couldn't have said it better. I completely agree, both on comics and music, and especially
Thank
music
you.
that, you know, from our era that we listened to. Oh, Rob, remembering early MTV, of course, they started their programming with the Buggles, and
Yep.
ironically, Video killed the radio star. And he says
Yep.
those early MTV exposed us to British bands that weren't getting any airplay because they had video clips for Top of the Pops. Absolutely, man. No, it
Too
was.
true.
I remember when they were called promotional films before they were called music videos, and we had like Meatloaf for "Bat Out of Hell," that album, '78 or so, had promotional films for that. Mike Nesmith, I don't know. Do you remember before MTV? He had produced a show for Nickelodeon called Pop Clips, and they would show videos on there. And really, you know, by the way, I don't know if you've read the oral history of MTV. It's fantastic,
I
unbelievable book.
have not. I have not. But something else I think that's very interesting, and I don't know if it was a regional thing, but even before MTV, I remember sneaking upstairs in the middle of the night to watch a black and white TV. And there were shows on like Kenny Everett video
Kenny Everett,
showcase.
we had Kenny Everett in Chicago, sure.
And
British
there
show,
were
yeah.
just other weird shows. And I think it was a night flight happened somewhere in the 80s there. So
Yeah,
that
after
was an opportunity.
MTV, and yeah, and
Right.
Rob mentions Night Flight as well on the
Yeah.
USA Network. Yeah, that was a great
Tho-
show.
Those
That's where I first saw Magical Mystery Tour. The whole film of Magical Mystery Tour, Night Flight showed it.
And I have to say, I got to give Night Flight credit for inspiring me to do anthologies. Because again, for me, it's music and comics. And they used to have these great features. The one I remember most of all was the politics of dancing and things that were all tied in to, you know, they would pick a theme. And I still think anthologies are so much fun to curate and edit when they're done well. I think too many people just think, oh, yeah, we'll be generic. So a lot of people can just send us ideas. Well, when you do that, everybody sends you the same idea or an idea that's been done to death. And I think when you get specific and you come up with a title or a way of bringing disparate ideas together, or maybe things that actually deserve attention that no one has been paying attention to, that's when you get a great anthology of any kind: music, film, comics, you name it.
Yeah, you know, also again when we were kids in the '70s, great comic book anthologies. House of Secrets, you mentioned that Steve did the revival of, but
Yep.
Tales of the Unexpected, House of Mystery, and I remember for Marvel they had Where Monsters Dwell, and it was reprinting a lot of that pre-Spider-Man late '50s into the '60s sci-fi and monster stuff, and very Twilight Zone sort of stories and stuff. But yeah, no, Bernie Wrightson, Mike Kaluta, naming just a couple artists off the top of my head that really
Yeah.
were blowing my mind in the '70s. And television, God, there were great shows. Tales of the Unexpected,
Really
Dark,
creepy.
Dark
One
Circle.
step, one step beyond
Step
freaked
Beyond.
me out. I think I saw probably one of the scariest movies ever. I think it was called Trilogy of Terror. I will never
Karen
look
Black.
inside an oven again.
Karen Black, absolutely, with the devil
I
doll
don't
and
cook
everything.
anyway. I can't
My
cook
good friend,
anyway. So
my good friend Svengoolie on his horror Saturday night horror show that's on MeTV. He just ran the last 2 weeks because they've been doing for October. They were doing double features, and
sure.
he ran Trilogy of Terror and another great '70s TV show, The Night Stalker.
Hmm.
He ran the pilot and the second pilot movie called The Night Strangler, and
Wow.
they're both great TV movies. And that's another thing, Shel, because and I was saying, really this entire week leading up to Halloween with my guests, I was like, all right, what did you watch? What did you read? Both movies in the theater, but also TV stuff. A lot of TV movies of the week were great horror movies that
Oh
actually
yeah.
hold up and are still pretty disturbing. I mean, I remember a great Bermuda Triangle movie where it was Kim Novak and Alejandro Rey from The Flying Nun was in it,
Wow.
and it was a big demon possession thing that was happening in the Bermuda Triangle. And I remember a really bad sequel to Rosemary's Baby that Donna Mills of Falcon Crest did in the '70s because I had it bad
Wow.
for
She
Joe.
must have been very young.
She was very young, and yeah, she was my Brian Ferry in the '70s as far as
Got it. Yeah,
she
of
had my
course.
full attention.
I
She always had
have
my
to
full
laugh because I think that horror was really big for kids in the 70s. We had something called Creature Double Feature, which I think was on channel 48 outside of
Sure,
Philadelphia.
sure.
And, it scared me, but I still tried to watch it. And I remember Ultraman was like a favorite show of mine back then. Yeah, Rob is saying the UHF channels were pretty amazing. So yeah, we got exposure to that stuff. And
Oh,
as scary as it was, it really
thanks, Rep.
didn't like
Absolutely.
freak me out that much. Although Knots
Yeah,
Landing did scare me. My
yeah. Well,
sister was into those
you think
shows.
for my
Okay,
Donna Milk
all
reference,
right.
I screwed up and
Listen,
said Falcon Crest
but
instead of
that's
not.
okay. But that's okay because it's Dallas. It's all of them. My sister
Yeah,
was a
they were all
super
connected.
fan.
Yes.
That was her jam. But she also liked sports, John. You
Oh
might
wow.
have connected with her with sports. So I don't know.
All right, fair
I
enough.
don't know.
But
We'll have to
but no,
get her on the show sometime.
a lot of those TV movies and TV shows that were anthologies, like Dark Circle, was an ABC horror anthology show. You can find them on YouTube,
Oh,
and they look
cool.
pretty
I'll
good.
have to
They
look.
look pretty good.
So you
So
said we were going to talk about comics that we love that are horror comics. So
yeah,
what would you say if you have to pick one? What's your favorite?
Tomb of Dracula.
Okay.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh God. I mean, truly, Gene Colan was at his best. Why am I blanking on who wrote Tomb of Dracula? Was it Doug Mensch?
Don't look at me.
Yeah, I can't
I
remember.
wasn't. It's funny. My colleague Elisa Quitney, who was an editor with me at Vertigo for many years, she was a huge EC fan, and she loved romance comics. I mean, she and I were quite different too. My first
Thank you, Alex. By the
favorite.
way, real fast, Marv Wolfman on Tomb of Dracula. Go ahead. Your first.
Oh no, awesome. So one of my first monthly comic books that I bought was Hellblazer, Jamie Delano, John Ridgway. That just pulled me in, like no question. I was going to be a regular monthly comic book reader, and it was Hellblazer that I picked up at not Fat Jack's, at Comics for Collectors in Ithaca, and continued picking up the monthly comic when I got to Philadelphia, when I went to Fat Jack's, got a job at Kamiko. But the other book I have to mention is Dracula by John J. Muth. When
Oh,
I
that's
picked
great.
that
I
up,
didn't know. I
you
love
remember
John.
that one?
No, I
So
just remember him
Jay,
with DeMatteis when
well,
they did
yeah,
Moonshadow.
Moonshadow. Well, when I went into Comics for Collectors in the fall of 1987, and I picked up Love and Rockets and Grendel and Hellblazer, the other books that blew me away were books that looked like fine art and that didn't read like comics. So Jay Buth did an adaptation of Dracula. I cried, when I read and studied his painting of Mina and of just how he made his choices for a limited palette, how he actually captured light and shadow. I used Dracula to help me understand lighting in comics. And so that will always be really, really important to me. And also, Blood Tale, which to this day, and that's by Mark DeMatteis, J.M. DeMatteis,
Yeah.
and Kent Williams. That to me is the best. Oh my goodness, I must mean it if my headphones are falling out. The absolute best vampire story, full stop, in comics or in fiction or in film. My vote, the absolute best. I literally fell to the ground each time I read the comic. Now I was 20, I was a bit dramatic, but it holds up. I read it like a year ago, and it's still magnificent in every way.
Really, it's funny because stuff from the 80s and 90s, you're right. And once you said Hellblazer, I'm like, yeah, I was a huge Hellblazer reader and I loved it. But yeah, I don't know why I go more to the 70s product, because when I was a little kid, I would read that stuff. Actually, Gold Key had a good Twilight Zone comic book that I thought was effective. Also, did you ever watch another great old show? You mentioned One Step Beyond. Did you ever watch Boris Karloff's show Thriller?
I did not.
That was it
Did
was
not.
another early 60s, same era as Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, and Boris Karloff was the Rod Serling of that show. And they would have, sometimes they'd have pure crime, sometimes suspense, but they did, obviously, having Boris Karloff, a lot of horror. And it was a very good show. It only lasted 2 seasons. I'm pretty sure you can watch it on Tubi if you've never seen it. Yeah, I really appreciated all that. But no, you're right. God, and Vertigo. It's really interesting that you were showing me. Did you show me? You showed me off the air. Your lone Vertigo editing horror experience, right?
Well, two of my favorites come to mind. This big one is iZombie.
Of course.
And I know some people know it from the TV show, but it was a comic book first. And I guess most people know it was a comic book first, because the one beautiful thing they did is they had Mike Allred do the credit sequence.
Yeah.
And that meant everything to the team, which was, of course, Mike Allred, artist extraordinaire. Chris Roberson was the writer, and I was the editor on the book, and we had a great team of guest artists and letters and colorists, and just, it was an incredible editing experience. And that was the one, believe it or not, that was the one that I put on the table when I was asked to come up with a comic book series that could be a monthly periodical, but that would have a great shot at making the transition to TV. And it's like, you can only tell people that you know it when you see it, and you see it when it's in front of you. And when the pitch came in from Chris Roberson, it was a pitch for Graeger, was a DC name. And I wasn't interested in resurrecting old titles. I did that a couple times in my career. I did it with House of Secrets. It was unique and fun and different, but I wanted something that had like guns a-blazing, that was very indicative of the times. So I suggested iZombie as the title because iPhones and iPads and all of the something were so popular, and it seemed like a good idea. DC had iVampire, and there was iClaudius. So I thought, why can't we do an iZombie? So I thought, the thing that I remember most of all is telling Chris, after we worked on the pitch for a few rounds, I said I could really see Mike Allred drawing this. And he's paused on the phone. He said, "You mean someone like Mike Allred?" And I said, "No, I can see Mike Allred drawing this." And he's like, "Well, what do you think the chances of getting Mike Allred?" And I said, "Well, give me half an hour. We'll find out." And he went, and I said, "Talk to you in a few minutes." Put the phone down. And this is true, and Mike will tell you. Mike will one day come on this podcast with us, and he will admit this is true. Picked up the phone. "Hey, Mike, we've been friends since 1987. And again, we connected over Bowie. So, music and comics connection. It's for life." So I said, "Mike, I've got this great pitch for a book. It's called iZombie, and it's about a gravedigger who eats a brain and solves the mystery because she gets the last moments of someone's life in her head. And she kind of looks like a young Debbie Harry." And he went, "I'm in." So the young Debbie Harry was more me, knowing that like we love Debbie Harry. So yeah, and that
That's
was
so
it. And
fantastic.
that's editing. But that's editing. And you know, John, it's funny because a lot of people don't realize that. I think editors today are more facilitators and should definitely be organized, get the vouchers, into accounting so that people can get paid quickly, crunch deadlines. But the best editors have vision and they're not afraid to hire and fire the right people or the wrong people and fire quickly and put their own instincts forward. And in this case, it really worked out in spades. So iZombie is one of my picks for a favorite horror because Mike is like you, Mike is into the whole monster mash, the whole era of 50s and 60s creatures. So we made it our mission to not only have sort of a monster of the week or the month, but we really wanted to go back to those familiar characters and tropes and then subvert them a little bit.
That's
So
excellent.
it was a good one.
I have for my Patreon page, Sean wanted to know. He says you're one of those editors that creators not only liked but also credited for the success of their books. I'm sure this is covered in your book, but what do you think contributed to your success? And he also wants to know, was there something that Karen Berger told you that has stuck through the years? Of course, Karen ran Vertigo for many of its heyday years.
Well, when you say what's the secret of your success, I worked my butt off. I was devoted to comics. I discovered them and I felt like my education in film and audio and video production dovetailed beautifully with editing comic books. It was a similar thing. And I loved being in charge. I loved being a part of the process. And I think for me, it was just devoting my life to comics in those formative years in the 90s. So I had a lot of fun on weekends, but I was not that person who would run out of the office at 5 o'clock or even 7 o'clock. I would work until the job was done, and what wasn't finished went home with me. So when people tell you that, it's all luck or you never know, it's like, no, you show up and do the work. And people will remember you when you deliver on your promise. So I learned that from my dad. So if I had to say something that Karen mentioned to me, it isn't about comics. My favorite thing that Karen said to me was when I had my son Spencer, way back in 2004. I remember that I was on maternity leave for 3 months, and it was very weird to not be working constantly. And she came over to my apartment, and she gave me a plant, and she said, the best day of being a mom when you have a baby is every day.
Oh.
And I thought that was such a great thing to say to a new mother of a newborn baby, someone who all I ever did was take care of comic book teams. I had no idea how to change a diaper, until this baby came along and started crying. So I just loved that. I thought that was like such a terrific thing to say to someone, and handing me a plant, which was a terrific gift. And I have to say that was more of a life bit of advice, but it was true. It was watching a child become, and is just, there's nothing like it. I'm saying that now because my son is like now at college, so he can't be annoying me in the other room playing his games. I don't have to. Last year, I think I had to shout at him a few times when we did an interview. He plays guitar, so there was the guitar, the drums, and the video games. But no, I think that would have to be it.
Well,
we
John,
had a good run. We had a good run working together, Karen and I.
that's awesome. That's fantastic. John is sold on the new book. He says he just backed the Kickstarter, which is great.
Thank you.
And then he also left me a question on Patreon, and he wanted to know, as legendary as Shelly's career in comics is, I would like to know what is on her current music playlist.
That might give away my secret boyfriend or my secret crush from the 80s. So, well, I don't know if I'm going to answer that question right now. I love you for asking that question. I really do. I have to admit, that unlike some people who share a house with me, and that person, by the way, is back there drawing, or upstairs drawing Geezer. He's finishing up issue 2 of Geezer.
Yeah, that's
Almost
great.
at the printer. Almost at the printer. But Philip is the kind of person who like loves music so much. He'll listen to a variety of music throughout the day, maybe Radio 6, and he can go from folk music to guitar rock. But I am much more a creature of habit. I know what I like and I like what I love. So I might just go through the whole Clash catalog in 2 days, 3
Cool.
times, backwards and forwards. And then I'll go back to Sandinista again because it's all killer, no filler. And you can all fight me on that. So I'm
Great.
kind of different than Philip in that way. I'll pull out my vinyl collection and I'll always play David live vinyl because I like the pops and the hisses. So I guess when it comes to music, I just do play favorites. But that said, something I didn't mention in the Kickstarter, and I know John is going to dig this, I've got a playlist for each issue, and it's not just a playlist of the time. It's like what we were listening to and what we should have been listening to. So it's going to alternate. So you might get David Cassidy, I Think I Love You, which I'm sure my sister was singing every day in the shower. And after that, you might get Moon Age Daydream, which could be
Very
a really nice segue. And I think Rob might agree with me on that one. That would be a good segue.
That sounds great. Alex wants you to know, as a retired summer camp counselor and comics fan, I backed Suddenly One Summer Camp from Hell this morning. Very cool. Good to
Thank you
hear.
so much, Alex.
Absolutely. So we'll remind everybody, only a 15-day window for Suddenly One Summer Camp from Hell. So everyone needs to go to Kickstarter and back this great book that Shelly and Liz has created. Very, very, very cool. What else, Shell? There is another. Wasn't there another Vertigo series that you?
Yes. Well, another Vertigo series that I highly recommend that I edited, but even if I didn't, if I wasn't the editor of this book, I just saw it on Netflix, and it's like Chef's Kiss. It is the best comic book to TV adaptation ever. This is Bodies. This is the original first issue. This was the variant cover by David Finch, and it was a book that I had the honor of editing in 2013. And I want to show the original cover because this cover is by Fiona Stevenson, who is the beautiful and talented wife of Dean Ormston, who some of you might know is one of the interior artists of Bodies. But Fiona and Dean are great friends. They came to my wedding, and I had no idea that Fiona was a painter or that she could paint like this. I mean, look at that. I mean, we're talking like
it's gorgeous.
Very, right?
Very Gil Elfgren, yeah.
Yes, very Elfgren. And I had no idea. I went to a convention and she was tabling, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "Oh, I'm going to sell some of my paintings." I'm like, "Your paintings?" So I thought at first she meant she acquired old paintings. So I knew I was going to hire her to paint something for sure. And the reason I'm bringing up Bodies is because sadly, the late Cy Spencer passed away of heart failure like a month or two after Bodies was greenlit for television. And so I don't know the full story. I haven't worked for DC Comics in many years, but I can tell you the truth that working on Bodies was a career highlight because Cy Spencer was and will always be the William Blake of comics for me. He was unlike anyone else, and this was a genius idea. And we had many artists working with us. So I implore you to watch the TV show, but also I think DC finally caught up on like reprints. I think they went back to press on this. It wasn't available for a while. It's out today, I think. So I would say read the comic and then see the TV show, or vice versa, whatever's easier to access for you. Don't get through one and then go to the other one, because the reason why I'm so excited about it is that I really think that the people making Bodies respected the fact that it was a comic book first. And that's always been my philosophy. I really don't mind if people are doing adaptations for film, theater. I know that Bendis has like some theater productions. I think that's all cool. But the story, if the story needs to be told on paper first, and it deserves to be a comic, then it should be a comic. So to me, it's the purest art form. And having the periodicals reminds me of how intense Cy and I worked on this book. And it was not an easy one to sell to the powers that be. So the people who approved the pitches, they didn't find it quite as easy of a sell as I did. But the time traveling serial killer had a nice ring to it to me. And what was interesting is that convincing them how it had legs and showing them how cool it was going to be, it took a while, but it was worth every moment in a boardroom, sweating and beating a drum and saying, hey, come on, this is I knew Cy Spencer was such an incredible writer, and he had done other Vertigo projects, but this was really his magnum opus. And I know in my heart that he would have been delighted with not only how the series landed, which we know he loved, but then how Netflix and that British team understood his vision and honored it.
Is the TV show called Chef's Kiss, or is it also Body?
No. I was saying Chef's Kiss because that's what the kids say when
see.
it's like the best, right?
Yeah.
And I only know that not because my son doesn't speak like that, but a lot of the young writers and artists I work with, they do that, and they say that to me. So the show's called Bodies.
So it's Bodies, okay.
And this is another example of an editor working with a writer, and we had a lot of chats on the phone. We would meet sometimes in England, and we had already worked together for a number of years, but this was the one. And it's like you know it, and you can feel it in your bones. And it only happened once I threw the title Bodies out to Cy. He had this idea, but he wasn't quite sure what to do with the idea. And so when we started talking about a body, the bodies, the recurring artifact, which was a body, it started to gel. And so that's what the best editors do. It wasn't my idea, it was his idea. But in working with him, we tried to come up with a way to bring cohesion to it that was interesting and unique, and that also told the high concept in a different way. So a time traveling serial killer, and it's the same body. So is it one body or is it many bodies? So it means a lot to me to talk to people like you, John, and share with people that might be interested in making comics, that comic book editing has changed a lot over the years, but it's always what you make of it. So if you want to be an editor, whether you want to just self-edit and self-publish, or whether you want to work for a small indie company or one of the majors, go in with all of the positive energy that you can muster, and know that you're going to have to make compromises. Pick and choose your battles, but stick to your guns. Bring in people that you believe in, and people that respect you and that will be grateful that you helped them along the way. Because too many people, especially in Hollywood and in all kinds of industries, they're happy to know you for a minute, and then they'll step on your neck to get ahead. So all I can say is, if you're going out there and you want to make comics and edit comics, go for it. But just remember, keep your expectations low, but keep your vision and your drive urgent. Like old Joe Strummer. If there's one thing that Clash always taught me, and I know, John, I repeat the same stories to you, it's seeing the Clash live on TV, 2 a.m. on a UHF station, seeing Joe Strummer perform live somewhere. That's how I wanted to live. I just wanted to make art that's urgent.
I get it. No, I hear you. And, that was the great thing about Vertigo. And it's ironic because last week, the executive at DC stepped down, and it likely wasn't just that person's decision, but I really think it was a grave mistake, ditching the Vertigo imprint and the Vertigo philosophy. And now I understand why, and especially given Warner, and I'm saying this, everybody, not Shelly, but I understand Vertigo or Warner Brothers' financial woes and Discovery's financial woes. And their thought is, all right, well, let's really concentrate on playing the hits. And, we've got 7 or 8 Batman titles and several Superman titles, But the great thing about Vertigo was from the start, and even prior to that, on books like Swamp Thing and Constantine and things, or Hellblazer, these were great ideas that were new and original. And Vertigo just was this great boutique studio comic book company or division of DC that really made interesting original stories. And as you
Well,
said, I mean,
and that,
body
yeah,
coming from that. I mean, it shows that there was validity in pursuing these new. Well, in the case of iZombie, it was kind of a respin on Gravedigger, but even it was a lot. It is a lot different than the
it,
original.
Oh, it was. And in fact, we really wanted it to be, just to say about Zombie, we didn't want it to be like a Vertigo spin on Gravedigger. It was just pitched like that, just because I think Chris maybe just didn't know how to get my attention. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember. But I wanted it to be original because I wanted both Chris and Mike to have creator ownership. So it was meant to be very different, by the way. But to your point about Vertigo, it was all Karen's vision, and she was always very much a champion of the writer, the auteur, guiding the stories, which is how, Neil came in, and she gave Neil his first big break, with Sandman, and he's always been appreciative. And what were called the Burger books, not to be confused with Karen's Dark Horse line, but back in the late 80s, those books were referred to around the company as the Burger books. They were Hellblazer and Doom Patrol and Animal Man and Swamp Thing. So that her vision of books became Vertigo for people that didn't know. But Vertigo morphed and changed so much through the 90s and the 2000s. And I think the real shame just about comics in general, not just Vertigo, is that we went through an age where things were looking so bright and comics were so inventive. So many great voices and strong, talented writers came out of the 90s. And then in the 2000s, it was starting to really develop lots of really young, exciting talents. And then we hit the skids, the 2008, we had the financial crisis. And I don't think comics and even pop culture has recovered in the same way. I think that people tend to go for comfort food, and I think that's why a lot of the emphasis was play the hits. Like you said, let's go back to the things we know people like. When people like us who appreciate, the provocateurs, for lack of a better word, and we want invention and we want to be challenged. We want to learn the rules, but we want to learn the rules to break them. I mean, that's just it. I think it's a shame that we've gone back to the dark ages, not only with media and pop culture, but also we've talked about this before with politics and social issues, and it's really a shame. So if I can pivot back to comics, we can still change the world with comics. And I am going to share my other favorite horror book. It's a new one.
Hold on. Zooming in.
It's called Blobby Horror. Now, if you're British and you're up late, I salute you. John, do you know what Blobby Horror is?
I have no idea what Blobby Horror is. Tell me.
Okay, so in the 90s, there was this character called Mr. Blobby, and he terrorized a nation. And I only know about Mr. Blobby because I went to England as often as possible in the 90s. Sometimes it was for a UCAC convention, but often it was just for a vacation because I could pay $300 for a round trip to England. I'd sit in the back right by the bathroom in the smoking section. Cheap ticket, didn't mind the smoke. Mr. Blobby became the nightmare for anyone between the ages of like 2 and 102 because Mr. Blobby was weird. I'll show you another picture to prove it. So this is an anthology that was kickstarted a couple months ago, and so many incredible artists are in it, and I'm sure it'll be available elsewhere. But one of the things I love about kickstarting is that it's a community. So many times when I'm running a campaign, I will support other people's work that I'm interested in. What I won't do is support people that just hit me up every 10 minutes on Facebook or through my DMs and say, hey, we'll support you, you'll support me. I always think about my audience. And right now my audience is all ages. So I'm not going to suggest that anyone who is into all ages books buy Mr. Blobby, for instance, or maybe don't watch Bodies if you're 8 years old. But I will say that it's a great way to discover new talents, especially through an anthology. And Kickstarter has had so many terrific books. So I wanted to share that one as well. There's a British artist named Sarah Gordon, who I think is going to just blow everyone's mind in the next couple of years. She's got a story in that horror anthology, and she's also doing a story for me on another new book coming out in a few months. So check her out, Sarah Gordon. She also goes by Sarah Gorgon, which I think is actually a very cool way. If you're going to change your name from Gordon, you might as well call yourself Gorgon if you like horror. Am I right?
Absolutely. Wesley, nice comment about Vertigo. He says, I was 14 growing up in Tulsa when Vertigo became a line. Read them all, blew my mind. I would have loved more Rachel Pollack stories.
Rachel Pollack is amazing, and what she did for Vertigo was tremendous, and I wish she would have written more. She worked very closely with Lou Stathis, who was a great mentor and friend and boyfriend to me for a little while in the 90s, and he was the editor of Doom Patrol, and he put Ted and Rachel together, and wow, what an amazing team. Two people you could never imagine meeting under any other circumstance than on paper with Doom Patrol. And I can tell you, because I was there, they got along like a house on fire. Because the editor, brought them together. I mean, and that's the joy and the beauty of editing comic books. And, John, that's another reason why, I've been teaching. I mentioned my mom was a teacher, and I always thought it was such a noble profession. And I'm more like my dad than my mom. My mom has such patience. My dad and I, not so much. So teaching was never something I thought would be good for me. But I've kind of pushed myself off the high dive, and I make myself do it. I'm not a natural public speaker. I have anxiety issues like everyone else, but I've enjoyed teaching my 101 Zoom class. I've done it 3 times so far. I've met the most interesting, loyal, talented creatives from all over the world. And it's reminded me why I love comics, because sometimes it's just throwing out a buzzword, like an operative word. Like when I do the class, I talk about everything from how an editor works with a writer to how an editor works with a colorist. So I might say opacity, and maybe someone doesn't know what that means. So by just telling someone that that's the depth of black, or how dark something is going to print and how rich a black is going to look on the page, it's gratifying to me, because maybe that will trigger someone to become a colorist or become an editor who actually can speak the parlance and art direct a colorist better than that colorist has ever been directed, because their editor doesn't return their phone calls. So I've enjoyed teaching because of paying it forward. I mean, really, that's the truth. And I've met so many terrific people thanks to that.
So, Shell, is this something you're doing on your own? Are you doing it in association with a college?
I am. It's both. I do teach.
Because I remember.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead and explain. Because you were on with Diana Schutz, and you took over her course for a while. I don't know if you're still doing that.
I am, actually. Diana Schutz was my first class in comics, and she designed a course for Portland State University called Comics Editing. And she spent quite a while designing the course. She taught it one semester in 2021, and she decided she was done with teaching, because she had been doing college education for maybe 15 years, and she was doing more translation. That's her real joy. I think she picked up an Eisner this year for Black Spad.
She did.
So she's bilingual. I think she might be trilingual. She's super bright. And she called me. She said, will you take over the class? And I thought, oh God, no, don't ask me that. And she said, well, I think you should, and you can take whatever you want from my syllabus, but you wrote a book about editing comics. So why don't you just teach from your book? And there was a part of me that felt really guilty, because she was my first boss in comics, and she was scary. Scary because she was super serious and smart as a whip. So I didn't remember much about English grammar when I was, right out of college, where I was worshiping the ground of like French filmmakers. I wasn't really thinking about syntax or, the difference between a semicolon and a colon. So she taught me a lot of fundamentals that I'm sure I forgot over the years. But I said yes because I thought it would be a really good thing for me to do. I thought it was time for me to step up and give it a try. So I taught last spring at Portland State. It was accredited, so it was 10 weeks, two times a week, and there was homework. There were 14 students, and it was a blast. And so I'm doing it again next spring.
Outstanding. That's great to hear. So then the Zoom class, when is the next semester of that, or period that you're doing it?
Well, I try to teach the 101 class at least once or twice a year, mostly because it's fun. I set it up like a weekend class. I try to make it at a time that's convenient globally. And I will tell you what impressed me this time. The class is Saturdays at 10 o'clock Pacific time, runs for 2 hours. And then there's a Sunday optional Q&A where we just drink tea and people just, hit me with questions. And it's questions about the class lecture from the day before, or it's questions about Joe Strummer. And the answer to that is no, I never met him. And my heart is still broken, Tad, if you really wanted to know. But I know you know the answer to that, Tad. So the really special thing about this past class was that I found out that I had a student that woke up at 3:30 in the morning from Australia to attend the live class. So when I tell you that these people are dedicated, they are, and they're terrific. So those are the people I want to know, people that are serious about the craft, that care about every part of the book, from the logo to the inking.
Well, I'll say too that first of all, I remember distinctly when I started Word Balloon back in 2005, everyone at Marvel was like, I don't know, they had a book called, I want to say, The Book of Souls, and it was Colleen Doran and J. Michael Straczynski writing it. And, their ambition was, we got to figure out a way to do Vertigo here at Marvel. They never could. And they certainly tried. And there were good books that were created like Book of Souls. But so there's that. But I will say that as Marvel and DC have, for lack of a better word, abandoned new ideas, although there are some new ideas. My good friend Ram V is doing The Vigil at DC, which is an entirely new group. It is a superhero book. But while they are sticking with the superhero genre, we now have Vault, we have Aftershock, we have other publishers that are really stepping up. And horror is so well represented right now when you go to a comic shop in a way that even in the height of the 70s with Tomb of Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, all the Marvel stuff, and then, like I said, House of Secrets, House of Mystery, all the great DC stuff, it's like there are dozens of great horror comics being made today. And further, independent comics, God only knows, and again, Warner has its financial troubles, Disney has its financial troubles. I'm sure comics eventually will be greatly impacted. It already has been by the financial ones. It doesn't matter because creatives are making their own books like you do, and others do. And again, they're doing it on their own. Thank God there are crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter. And so that's going to continue no matter what the ultimate fate of DC and Marvel books are. And I also think as we get older, I mean, hey, I still like superhero stuff. I still enjoy it, but I don't know. I think around 40, I found myself.
Me. It wasn't me, I swear.
Of course not. I found myself wanting to read other genres, and creators have always stepped up and given me alternatives. You mentioned the Hernandez brothers, Love and Rockets, David Lapham with Crime, a wonderful, I mean, these wonderful creators that, again, you can't stop them. Mike Allred and his creator-owned stuff, Madman and the like, I mean, no, you cannot stop these people. So Rob is right.
Which is great.
Marvel did have Epic, and DC was doing all these experiments. That's true. I always saw Epic more as a sci-fi line than I did a horror line, though.
interesting. I always thought Epic was the precursor to Vertigo. I mean,
Certainly.
some of those epic books were just astounding. And I was picking them up also with Rob, who I think not with Rob per se, but I think we both went to the same comic book shop. And I just think that time in comics was fascinating. 86 to 92 to
Yep.
me was as invigorating as what we did at Vertigo, from 92 to whenever.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that, and I agree. Well, and that was the thing,
2016.
the direct market of that mid 80s period into the early 90s, it really was like, I mean, there were always like different little one-stop kind of independent comics here and there, or independent comic stores. But really, yeah, the direct market really exploded in the mid 80s. And as I said earlier, that whole black and white period. And oh my God, there were just comics of every genre and every type of art style and writing, great writing. No, it really made made me pay attention more. And I
Well,
stayed away. I mean, out of college, couldn't afford comics, so I had to watch it for a while. But I came back in the late 90s because I had heard about Bendis doing Ultimate Spider-Man and Kevin Smith doing Daredevil, and Brubaker and Rucka were doing Batman at the time. And I'm like, oh, these new voices are really good. But immediately I'm like, all right, that's cool. Superheroes are being taken care of. What else is going on? And I really,
yeah.
that's when I really started picking up the other genres. And I'm like, this is great. Comics are great.
And we can't discount some of those great black and white indie books that I think were really seminal back in the late 80s, like Hate by Peter Bagge, of course, 8 Ball, Santa Claus. And I am a huge fan of Charles Burns. And, between Black Hole and Last Look, and there were so many indie cartoonists who you would just discover by accident in the back of a store. That's what I miss about shops like St. Mark's Comics, where I would sometimes, and don't tell Mitch this, but I would hide books back there because I couldn't afford everything. And I knew I'd want to come back the next week and get it. So I would put certain books in certain places because you kind of had to do that if they only had one in the store. So
Totally.
There were definitely things that, Yummy Fur. There were things that were very obscure or obtuse that just challenged everything what I thought a comic book should be, that came out of those days, that I think continued to shape the indie scene.
No, I agree. Absolutely.
And Rob just said Raw and a Mouse. Absolutely. Raw. And, I just read the latest issue of Blamma by Noah Van Sciver, who is someone who I recently discovered. He's been in comics a long time, and believe it or not, I discovered him through his kids' book, Maple Terrace.
Wow.
And so did not know his work. Really, to be honest, thought he was Ethan Van Sciver, which is his brother. And that happens when you have a sibling, I feel like the Bissett's brothers, sometimes people got confused who was who. There were a couple of brothers in comics that I think people thought were the same person. So I'm going to give myself a free pass on that one. But Noah Van Sciver is the real deal. Tremendous cartoonist.
I agree. Very, very different in style and story from Ethan. No, I was like that with Alan Kupperberg and Paul Kupperberg. Alan was the older brother and stuff, and I'm still friends with Paul. Paul's going to be coming on very soon on Word Balloon. Talk about it.
Nice.
Oh yeah. That's funny. Rob says Noah Van Sciver is in Columbus. There you go, man. So yeah, I'm really glad you went to CX. Is it CXC?
Yes.
Yeah, man. Tom Spurgeon, the late lamented Tom Spurgeon, who was always a good friend to me with the Comics Reporter and Word Balloon and stuff. No, he created that incredible show. I do have to go at some point when I make more money and I can afford to.
You must.
When someone, when I'm not spending my own dime on a show, I'll travel and stuff. And no, I'd love to go.
It will be worth your while. It was the best indie show I've been to in many, many years. Honestly, it had it all. It had really talented creators, and it had terrific guests, and everybody was so nice, and everybody was supportive of indie comics. And at a time where most conventions are either 50-50 50% media, TV, Hollywood, 50% maybe Artist Alley, and not maybe not the kind of indie comics that I consider comics with an X versus whatever the other
Yes.
alternative
Yeah.
is. It's a
Yeah.
show that has such an eclectic mix of sheer and raw talent. That's the other thing, because so many conventions, sometimes you see things that maybe it's not really ready yet, or you see people that want guidance but that don't know how to get it. And this show is just, honestly, it's exemplary. I've called it the Angoulême of America, and I mean it. And I hope Jeff Smith is listening, because I was told that was his goal, was to create make Columbus and CXC into an Angoulême type of show. Now, I've never done Angoulême, but I know exactly what he was talking about. It was the city itself celebrating comics as an art form, as a way of life, and that's what it was. And the people were great.
Luca is going on in Italy right now, which is very much like Angoulême. And my buddy Sal Abenati is out there with his stuff and Alex Ross stuff as well. But yeah, I agree with Tad that Columbus is worth it just for the backroom tour of the Billy Ireland, part of Ohio State, and their great comics collection that they have at the Billy Ireland. Is it, I don't even know, is it a school or is it a museum? I'm not
Billy
sure.
Ireland.
Yeah.
It's a museum, and also it's a library. I mean, Tad can probably speak more eloquently about it, but I did get to spend some time there, and he's right. The tour was magnificent, and you could spend days there, just staring at, they had Milton Caniff pages, they had some original Charles Schultz character drawings, and it's just incredible.
Yeah, Ted says it's part of the Ohio State's library. Yeah.
Excellent. I can't thank you enough for inviting me on tonight. I know I try to do my best with the Halloween theme behind me. So, and talking about comics just in general, and horror comics is always fun. And I realize that, the book I'm doing now is probably the furthest away from a Halloween theme, except it has hell in the title. And hell is relative, right? Hell is subjective. And tiny hells of summer camp, there's good things. There's good things too. But I hope that I got people excited about the book, because, like I said, Liz Prince is a cartoonist who is on fire. There's a little hell connection again. And I really, really hope that you check it out. I have a free preview that's available. It's 8 pages, so it's more of what you're seeing here, but you can actually take the time to read some of the comic. And, like I've mentioned, it's all ages. So I've never done an all ages comic, but I wanted to actually have something that people could read with their kids or their grandkids, and actually say to their kids, hey, we used to read these. We used to read these back in the day. And you know what? They're really special. And periodicals are still special. And there's nothing like a self-contained issue, which used to be called a one and done, or a one shot. And they're important because those are the things you can take to camp and read 10 times. So thank you for listening to me talk about my projects, and always for sharing your great TV and musical insight. John, you're the best. And it's just so great to get so many people just chiming in and asking good questions and reminding us of our age. Rob Perry, you're still 4 years younger than me. You're a kid to me. He was a freshman. I was a senior. We were book DJs.
I get it. No, everybody, it's Suddenly One Summer Camp from Hell. The first issue is from 1971 to 74, and it's Shelly Bond's experiences in summer camp, Universal Stories with Liz Prince doing the art. And no, it's terrific, as are all of Shelly's creator-owned books. No, you know it's a pleasure. And then and my best to Philip back there. I hope his face clears up.
No, we're working on that. We're working on that.
And I'm excited for the second issue of Geezer, the adventures of a 90s pop band, a Brit pop band, and excellent. And now I'm blanking. Who's his collaborator on that?
Will Potter, who
Will
is the
Potter, of course.
bassist of Cud, the Cud band, who are on tour right now.
Hey, that's great.
They are. They're playing with the Boo Radleys, and they are
Wow,
tremendous.
the Boo Radleys. I love the Boo Radleys. That's awesome.
They are a tremendous live band, just incredible. And I will tell you, anyone who is waiting for Geezer 2, when I tell you it's going to be worth the wait, you are not going to believe your eyeballs when you see these crowd scenes and all of these celebrity cameos that may or may not be in the book. I'm not going to say. I'm the editor, but I'm not saying. But it's truly the best work of Philip's career, and that's saying something. So I only speak the truth. I married my favorite artist. He became my favorite person, and is worth the wait, people. It's coming to you very soon. He's like on the last panel, I think, right? I think so. Yeah, he said yeah.
All right, fair enough.
Excellent. Said yeah.
All right, Shell. Thanks as always. Tomorrow night, everybody, on Word Balloon, Jim McLaughlin will be joining me as the crow flies, and we'll be talking about the Hero Initiative, but a really neat seminar. We mentioned Shelly's teaching of comics. This is going to be a great all-day seminar at UCLA, taught by two of the masters, Mark Waid and Howard Chaykin. Mark taking care of the script and Howard taking care of the art. And truly, I have watched them do a condensed version of this online. And these are two guys that are very simpatico in terms of like why certain panels matter, panel placement, things like that really will be invaluable to any aspiring comic book creator. And Jim's going to give us more details on that. We're also going to look back at his years when he was editing Wizard magazine, the People magazine of comics, as we all remember. That's the best way I could think of to describe it, really. But yeah,
it was the only thing we had. So we definitely looked through it, and for better or for worse,
for better or for worse, absolutely.
They weren't always big fans of like things that strayed from superheroes, but they had some terrific things. They had some terrific contributions to the industry.
When I was starting out Word Balloon as a podcast, very early on, I got mentioned in the podcast, got mentioned in Wizard magazine. I took it as a badge of honor that, all right, they're taking me seriously. They like what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
So that was a nice little compliment. But as you say, for better or for worse, because there were warts to Wizard, and we'll get into it with Jim. That'll be tomorrow night on Word Balloon Live. Same time as Shell's show, 7:00 West Coast time, 9:00 my local time, 10:00 Eastern. So please join us. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.